If you think of Alaska, follow down the northern area, there's a tip that comes out and almost touches Russia, and that's basically what we consider the Bering Land Bridge. So we're at the northern part of that peninsula. We're just south today of the Arctic Circle at about 61 degrees of latitude.
We came to Kotzebue where we're doing large banding drives, and my job is to gather the swans up onto the lake. So essentially I get to be an aerial herder, I guess, if you will.
We're capitalizing on a period in these birds' life cycle when they drop all their flight feathers and come to these big lakes and places that have good foraging. So molting is basically when you change out your feathers. And most birds lose feathers one at a time or not all at once the way these larger waterfowl do. The big picture of what we're doing is sampling for avian influenza in Alaska. The idea was if any place was going to be a likely migration route for avian influenza coming into the United States, it was going to be Alaska, because we have so many birds that basically go to Asia for part of the year, generally the winter, and then come here to breed. So that was the basic tenet of looking in Alaska.
Let me rig it to get home.
Tundra swans were picked as a priority species because they've been one of the most common wild birds in Europe and throughout Asia to show up with avian influenza. Doing field projects in Alaska is logistically difficult and expensive, so we're trying to get as much other data as we can while we're capturing these birds as possible. The swabs that we take for avian influenza are a very small part in terms of everything else that we could get in a single sample. In this study, we're also taking blood samples to look at health parameters and learn about the general health of the birds, exposure to contaminants, etc., historical exposure to viruses. Looking at migration patterns, there's 3 or 4 different ways we're looking at that. Okay, and mid-toe is
so ninth is the second, so that's the
1
last
to
one.
4.5.
I think it's the
I
ninth.
think it's this one probably.
It's not the other one.
Ninth primary?
Yeah.
Yeah, from this end.
Yeah.
So you can see these feathers, they're
Use
growing
it.
and they're full of blood. And the feather part is just starting to emerge. We're collecting a few feathers for basically a way to look at where the feathers were grown at, the signature of the soils, where the birds were feeding when they grew those feathers. So it gives them another way to look at migration and areas that the birds use. The satellite transmitters basically give us a small subsample of detailed data, and we can actually watch the birds as they migrate. It's pretty interesting, and it's backed up by what we see with the resighting information, but we often learn something new. By putting out bands and net collars, we find out more about where they ultimately end up, but oftentimes you miss that stopover, and those can be really important because those are ephemeral locations because of development. So if they lose those and they've been counting on refueling at that stop, it can be pretty devastating.
161. Respiration. Make an incision. The transmitter number. Magnet. In less than 24 hours, you can see the skin moving in and healing. The birds must have an amazing immune reaction. Okay.
For Niner 4 minutes ago. Wind 160 at 10, altimeter 2981.
Just the fact that they make this migration, that they come up here and take advantage of this resource, and it's all so brief and seasonal and harsh. It's definitely sort of a privilege to get to study them.